Okay.
Good morning.
Good morning, Vilma. How are you? Good morning. And a welcome, everybody, to Mystical Teachings from the Tanya. I'm Rabbi Ronnie Fine coming to you from Chabad Zichron Kadeshim in Montreal, Canada, where it's a privilege and a pleasure to share with you the Tanya. We say good morning, as we do every morning. People come on Facebook and they come on Clubhouse. So we say good morning. Diane in London, Ontario. Andrea is with us in Phoenix. TJ in Australia, where it's almost time to go to sleep, if not already. Linda and Denise, twin sisters who learn together and stay together, are with us in New York and Wembley, London. Richard, good afternoon, rather. Thank you for joining. Elaine is with us from Georgia. John from North Carolina, where he says it's rainy and cold. Okay. William in Texas, good morning. Clem in Brisbane, where it's about 12:30 a.m. Tim in Texas, where it's only 7:30 a.m. Simcha in Florida is with us. Alice in Baltimore, good morning. Who else? Eugene in Calgary. And Jacob and Nido. I don't know if I pronounced that right. I hope I did. Alan, all the way in Dollar des Amants. That's a suburb here of Montreal. And we have Vilma with us, Parrots, Shmuel, Matthew, Michael. Thank you for joining on Clubhouse. Okay. It's actually a very short class today and a nuanced idea where we are in chapter 38 speaking about kavana, intent. Till this chapter, we spoke about the action, that through the act, when we speak about the action, we mean action without intent, without mindfulness, without an awareness or any significant awareness. And doing a mitzvah is transformational, counterintuitive to say such a thing, but so it is. By just doing the act is transformational of ourselves and of the material that we use in the act of a mitzvah. But that's, as we continue, as we said yesterday, that is like a body without a soul. Now, the chiddush, the novelty is that even as a body that doesn't have soulfulness to it and is not, truly alive, there's still value. There's still a connection. There's a connection that's made with God, with the divine light from above through the very act itself. But it's lacking the soul, and therefore it is not truly animated. And it's not truly alive. And we're going to get a lot more on that coming up. But today, a brief idea that Alter Rebbe takes apart to understand what does it mean when we say something that is got body and has soul. The truth is, everything in the world has got body and soul, matter and energy. It's a makeup of. And in creation. So he explains the distinction between body and soul, that the soul has more vibrancy than the body. Yet the truth is they both conceal on the divine. This world, in English, the word world, Hebrew rather, the word world is olam. Olam comes from the word helam, Hester. This world is a Hester, a concealment on the divine light, on divinity. Not just the material is a concealment, but even the soul of every created being. And I'm not talking here about a divine soul, we're talking about the creation of everything, right? The creation, as the Arizal says, everything in the world has a soul to it. Even a stone, even a pebble, has the soul of it and the material of it. We understand that in modern science, energy and matter. So there is the soul of everything that is equally concealing on the divine as the material would be concealing. There isn't a distinction. Why is that? Because after all, everything that comes from the divine is comes down by a way of contraction of the divine light in such a manner that that everything is equally concealing because it's part of klipa. Klipas noiga. Klipas noiga is a shell, but noiga means a translucent shell, meaning that there is a ray of divine light that is good, that is in that shell, but it's covered over, and therefore it conceals. So even the spiritual aspect, the soulful aspect of anything and everything of creation has a concealment of God just as the material body of something does. So if that's the case, what's the distinction between, the soul of something and the material of something? So the Alter Rebbe explains that's only in the degree of the contraction of the light. So to give a metaphor, this world, the light of God as it comes and enters into this world from the Word of God, is like going through a very thick curtain. That thick curtain, as the light comes on the other side, is drastically different than on the other side, where the light is not being curtailed, where it's not being screened out. This thick curtain, the light that comes is greatly diminished. Right? And that's, again, everything that is of this world. The light of God is diminished. So much so, again, Hester, it is concealed. In other words, what does that mean? Even when we connect to the spiritual, to the godly aspect, to the soulful aspect of anything of creation, we will not perceive the godly light. At least we won't perceive it with our eyes. We won't perceive it and connect to it just, as such, because, again, it's covered over. Even when we're connecting to the soulful part of something. That being said, though, again, the degree of how much the light has been contracted and reduced will vary. That which is the soul of something versus that which is the material of something. So the material of something, the contraction of the light will be so much reduced that it'll be such a pinhole of light, as opposed to in the spiritual realm, it'll be a much greater, the metaphorically, take the same window, you have a curtain, right? So that thick curtain is blocking all of that divine light in this physical world, both in the spiritual part, the soulful part, and in the material part. But then now, if you put a plank of wood and you make a little pinhole, well, how much light's going to come from there? That's contraction. So the material world is like a little pinhole of light that's going to come through. The spiritual, the soulful part of the creation, the whole will maybe be much larger because the contraction isn't as great. And that's really the end of the idea over here, because it's going to continue tomorrow. We do the daily teachings. It's and that's going to bring us tomorrow to understand that yes, there is a distinction in different forms of creation. So animal versus vegetation versus inanimate, for example, and of course even and human, even above all of that. And we'll see that there's different levels of the creative force you know, all equally um, concealing the divine light, but the contraction of that light will vary between the various forms of creation, right? And understanding, you know, the more that the light is contracted, the lesser there is a vitality, and hence you'll see from inanimate to vegetation to animal to human. As that's where we're going with this, but we're not there yet. That will be in tomorrow's class. So the take home over here is, at least an idea over here, is that first of all, everything has a concealment of the divine light in creation. The various levels of that is there's different gradations, different levels of how much that light is actually contracted out. So what we have is then, and we've mentioned this many times before, everything comes from God Himself, all levels of vitality. In other words, there isn't, paganism or idolatry is that there's different sources of vitality. That's idolatry. There's only one source of vitality, and that's God. Ah, the holiness is and the direct connection that comes directly from God that we understand. So when we do good, when we're doing a mitzvah, a holy act, we get that vitality is coming direct from God. But even that which is of a mixture of good and evil, and we could be choose one way or the other to deal with it, or that something is completely shalish klipas etzmeus is completely the antithesis of anything holy. It's not the antithesis of coming from God. It's coming from God, getting its nurture from the middle ground of the klipas noiga, the admixture of good and evil, and that's where the complete negative forces of this world get their vitality. And the light is so restricted there, so contracted, that there is no sense of goodness in that or any um, positivity in it at all. So that is today's class. Any questions, any comments, any thoughts, anything to share? Vilma, please share with
Hey,
us.
Rabbi. Yes. So this whole concept of energy and God creating everything and concealment, the way I understand it and the way I think about it is about, everything was created. So if everything is created, then this whole like world of illusion exists for a reason. And this light that is divine, God's energy, is, to my understanding, so overwhelming that we cannot exist on that level. Nothing can exist on that level except God, which is why you have these levels of creation and what you call contracting of light. So, is it light in the form of energy? What do you describe that as?
Very good question and very good insight. Um, so light is a metaphor. You know, um, light we know has a source, right? The luminary is the source of light. The sun is the source of the sun ray, right? The lamp is the source of the illumination in the room. The candle is the source of the light, right? So we know that it has a source. So that's one of the ideas of light, and in its source, like the ray of light in the sun, is part of the sun. It's part of the sun globe. It um, has no reality of its own, and it has no existence or independence of its own. It's found in its source. So, so what you said was very true. We really, from from God's point of view, are like a ray of light within the sun. We're part of God. We're not separate from Him. So this concealment that we're talking about here is from our vantage point. from our vantage point, we don't feel that we're part of the source. We're in our source. We're in our, cocoon. We are separate, and in that sense of separateness, there's different gradations, and basically between matter and soul. Soul will be less of a separation. Matter will be a greater sense of separation. So and and ultimately, what we're here to strive towards is to recognize that we're really not separate. That this is it's a an illusion that God. I don't know if illusion is the right word. In a way, it's an illusion of creation. That God doesn't give us the capacity to be able to perceive that light, because if we would, then we would be nullified and we would just be a part of Him. What ultimately, our purpose here is to come to that reality on our own, to recognize that this is the divine truth, and that we work towards recognizing we're not separate from God. We are connected, and that's what the mitzvah gives us the capability of doing. So what we've learned till now is in the act of the mitzvah that creates the oneness with God. The greatest oneness is in the Torah study, as we've learned previously in chapter 37, is the greatest sense of unity. And now where we're going is that union and oneness that we can create is not just in the act, but also has to be in our awareness. It also has to be in our kavanah, in our intent, in our soulful engagement in the act that we're engaged in. So that's exactly exactly the point. Thank you for sharing that. Very good. Any other thoughts? Anybody? Questions? Comments? I know now that. Oh, gotcha. Please share with us.
Hi, Rabbi.
Hi, Basha. Good morning.
Good morning. I wanted to ask the level of concealment that each of us, would that be dependent upon our like using of this muscle of awareness, so to speak, with the different mitzvahs that we participate in, and our awareness, or our, while we're doing the mitzvah, whatever it may be, the concealment that, depending on like how aware we are when we do these mitzvahs.
Very good question. So, you know, we're talking here about really a union and a oneness, right? In other words, God creates the world in such a way that our perception is that there's a concealment and a contraction to such a degree that we feel independent, we feel separate. You know, I feel I am, right? I feel the I am of me. And that I am of me has needs, that I am of me has desires, that I am of me is, has, lusts and so on, addictions and so on and so forth that I want to fulfill. And where we're coming to over here is to understand that that's not the real truth. It's a concealment, a contraction that God created. And He did that in order that we, through our free will, can choose to not get not to perceive the concealment and the contraction as a ultimate reality, but it is only in order that I should rise above it and try to connect to Hashem in a way that I am bound up with Him. So in the act of doing the mitzvah, I am bound up with Hashem, but I'm not fully bound up, because if I don't have the awareness and if my heart's not engaged, and the mental process of understanding and the thought that's there, so it's not complete, and that's where we're going with this, is with kavana, with intent. It makes it complete. and make that connection. So the novelty is that even when it's not complete, there's still a divine connection in the act of doing the deed, right? In the act of extending and giving tzedakah, in the act of you know wrapping yourself with tefillin, in the act of on Pesach eating matzah, by the seder and so on. A lot of people eat the matzah and they know that it's a mitzvah. They know it's something you do, right? Do they understand that it's a poor man's bread? Do they understand that this is, the idea of your personal liberation, and that there's the idea of humility and all of the different meanings and appreciation that we have an awareness that awareness even brings to a heartfelt, connection in doing the action. That's kavana. That's the intent, and that brings to a full, um, you know, connection, unity, and a oneness with God. That's what we're talking about. But we're really in the middle of all of this. Today was like a real short, um, distinction between concealment and contraction to appreciate the, um, that when we speak about soul, when you do something with intent, that their soulfulness is, like, as opposed to doing it without intent, it's like a body without a soul. So here the alternative is just forewarning and telling us, well, body and soul really both conceal on the divine in the creative, in the creative world, in this creation, in this world that God creates. There is a distinction, though, in how much the light is reduced, retracted, contracted. That's, and we're going to continue with that thought tomorrow. I hope that clarifies.
Yes, it definitely clarified. Thank you so very much.
You're very welcome. Let me just read now from Linda. She says, I know now that every soul and the material of it is concealed of the divine. The light of contraction varies. The material has a pinhole of light. The spiritual isn't. The spiritual is much larger, right? Hence, we feel separate from our source, which is not the true reality. We need to recognize and work toward knowing that the divine truth is that we are connected to God, to Him. Excellent. Thank you, Linda, who yesterday with her sister celebrated their birthday. Mazel tov again. You can still get a mazel tov afterwards. Anybody else want to share? Vilma, anything more? Batya, we have Reb Rafoil with us. Oh, was. Okay. Peretz or Shmuel, Menachem. All right. Anybody else?
Yes, everyone's welcome to add or ask any questions to the discussion. I learned that we're always connected to our source because we couldn't exist otherwise. However, we don't feel that connection here in this body, in this world. There's an illusion of separation. There's an illusion of we are independent, that, God isn't here. But that's an illusion because God really is with us at all times. And everything that we do, we add intention to it, to recognize that fact that we don't always recognize. So I think the mitzvahs and our speech and our thoughts and that awareness is the meaning and the intent that we give it, that it can be divine if we choose to live with that in our awareness, in our thoughts, in our speech. We can choose to be connected that way, even if we don't see it
Right.
directly.
Yeah, very well said. In other words, the unity and the oneness that we have with God through the act, the words, and the thoughts, right? Because every mitzvah has an action to it, it has a speech to it. Through that, we are connected and united in one with the divine, with God, even though we may not experience it, we may not feel it, It doesn't take away from that reality. Absolutely. Very well said. All right. All right, folks. Amazing. Um, Anything else over here to share? Lisa says, I know now that it's our job to pull down the curtain and remove the veil to reveal the light of God, one mitzvah at a time. Very well said. That's what we exactly. And that's ultimately where we're going. And that's the direction that we're going to pull down that veil. And then we will be able to perceive, not just as we're learning now, we perceive in our mind's eye this truth that we're teaching, but we'll be able to perceive it with the naked eye. Absolutely, that's Mashiach. Klipa will be removed. All the negative forces and vitality will be removed, and there will be just the presence of, imagine just the presence of, in every moment will be experienced as a Kodak moment, because that light will be so clear, the connection will be so absolute that as a result, you can't be greedy. You because the only greed is because we hold on to things, because I feel vulnerable, I feel separate, and therefore I need this to give me some feeling of connection, some feeling of, you know, of self-worth. But when you'll be able to perceive that, um, that Kodak moment, that vitality that is not coming from Kalipa, um, and it'll be so real, so there won't be any greed, there won't be any tension between people, between nations, and we will have everlasting peace as a result, and so much more than that. All right, folks. Vilma, if you want to close up things.
Thank you. This was wonderful. Tanya class with Ronnie Fine, Rabbi, is done Monday through Friday at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can follow Chabad. Click on the little green house, or follow Mr. Rabbi Fine. Thank you. Thank you for your insight. As always, it was a pleasure.
Thank you, and thank you everybody for joining. Um, and as we are beginning to move forward for Pesach this afternoon at 12:45, I'll be giving some insights for Passover on Zoom and on Chabad ZK Facebook. And I'll also be on Clubhouse, as a matter of fact. So do come and join us. Wishing you a wonderful day. Be well, everybody. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Rabbi.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Thanks. You too. Thank you, folks. Please share the Alter Rebbe's teachings. Have a wonderful day.